Rain was coming down hard that Thursday night when David finished his work at the auto repair shop. He had been fixing cars for 12 years now, ever since his dad passed away and left him the small garage on Pine Street. The neighborhood wasn't fancy, but it was home. Working people lived here, nurses, teachers, bus drivers, folks who knew the value of a dollar. David was tired. His back hurt from bending over car engines all day, and his hands were stained black with grease that never seemed to wash off completely. All he wanted was to go home, heat up some leftover pizza, and watch TV until he fell asleep on his old couch. But as he pulled down the metal door of his shop, something caught his eye across the street. A woman stood next to a fancy electric car that clearly wasn't running. She looked lost and worried, holding what appeared to be an old flip phone in her hand. The rain had soaked through her expensive-looking clothes, and her hair was dripping wet. She kept pressing buttons on the phone, but nothing seemed to work. Most people would have walked past. It was late, it was raining, and getting involved with strangers could be trouble. But David's mother had raised him different. She always said that helping others was just the right thing to do, even when it wasn't convenient. He jogged across the street, dodging puddles. "Excuse me, miss," he called out. "You having car trouble?" The woman looked up, and David noticed. She had tired eyes, not just tired from the day, but tired in a way that suggested she carried heavy burdens. When she spoke, her voice was soft but clearly educated. "Yes, it just stopped working. I don't understand cars very well, and my phone died. This old one doesn't seem to connect to anything." David looked at the vehicle. It was one of those high-end electric cars that cost more than most people made in 2 years. The kind of car he rarely saw in his neighborhood, except when someone was lost and trying to find their way back to the wealthy part of town. "Let me take a look," he said, pulling out a small flashlight from his toolbox. He always carried basic tools, even after closing time, old habits from his father, who taught him that a mechanic's work was never really done. The woman stepped back, wrapping her arms around herself to stay warm. "I can pay you," she said quickly. I can figure out payment. I just need to get somewhere safe for the night." Something about the way she said it made David pause. She sounded like someone trying to solve a problem without all the usual resources people relied on. He had seen that look before, people between paychecks, people whose lives had taken unexpected turns. After checking under the hood and running a quick diagnostic, David realized the problem was serious. The main computer system had failed, and it wasn't something he could fix on a rainy street with a flashlight. This would need proper equipment and probably a new part that would take days to order. "I'm sorry," he said, straightening up and wiping rain from his face. "This isn't something I can repair right now. The whole electrical system needs work. But look, there's a decent hotel about 6 blocks from here. Not too expensive. I can give you a ride if you want." The woman hesitated. David could see her, weighing her options: trust a stranger or spend the night standing in the rain next to a broken car. "I know how this looks," David said, understanding her concern. "Strange guy offering rides to women at night. I get it, but my shop is right there. Been in business for 12 years. My name's on the sign. I'm not trying to cause trouble for anyone." She looked at his shop, then back at him. Something in his voice, or maybe just desperation, made her decision. "Okay," she said. "Thank you. I'm Elena. Nice to meet you." "Elena, I'm David." His pickup truck was old but clean. David cleared some work papers off the passenger seat and offered Elena a towel from behind the seat. "Sorry, it's not much. I use this truck for work, so it's not exactly luxury transportation." As they drove through the quiet streets, Elena stared out the window at the neighborhood. Small houses with front porches, corner stores with bright signs, people walking dogs despite the rain. It was a world that seemed both ordinary and somehow fascinating to her. "Have you lived here long?" she asked. "All my life," David replied. "Born to streets over. My dad opened the shop when I was 5. Always figured I'd end up somewhere else, maybe college, maybe the military. But when he got sick, Someone had to keep the business running. Turned out I actually liked fixing things. Elena nodded. There was something peaceful about his voice. The way he talked about his life, without complaint or big dreams of escape. Do you ever regret it, staying? I mean, David thought about it, sometimes. When the bills are tight or when I see friends who move to bigger cities doing well. But this neighborhood needs a good mechanic. People here work hard for their money. They need someone who won't overcharge them or fix things that aren't broken. They pulled up to the hotel, a simple 2-story building with a neon sign that flickered slightly. Not the kind of place Elena had ever stayed, but it looked clean and safe. About your car, David said as she gathered her purse. I can have it towed to my shop tomorrow morning. Won't charge you for the tow since you're in a tough spot. The repair might be expensive though, depending on what parts we need. Elena reached into her purse, but David held up his hand. Pay me tomorrow, after we know what needs fixing. No point in taking money tonight when I haven't done any real work yet. She looked at him with surprise. In her experience, everyone wanted payment upfront, wanted to secure their advantage before providing services. Are you sure? Lady, it's been a long day. It's raining, and you're stuck far from home. Let's just help each other out and worry about money tomorrow. As Elena walked toward the hotel entrance, she turned back. David, thank you. I mean it. Today could have been much worse. He waved from his truck. That's what neighbors do. I'll see you tomorrow. Driving home, David didn't think much about the encounter. He had helped someone who needed help. It was Thursday, tomorrow was Friday, and he had a car to fix. Simple as that. He had no idea that the woman he had just helped was worth more money than everyone in his neighborhood combined. He didn't know that she owned companies, properties, and investments across multiple countries. He couldn't have imagined that his simple kindness would change both their lives in ways neither could predict. All David knew was that someone needed help, and he had been able to provide it. In his world, that was enough. Friday morning came too early for David. His alarm went off at 7. But he had been awake since 5 thinking about Elena's car. The electrical problem looked expensive, and he worried about giving her bad news. Most people who drove cars like that expected quick fixes, not complicated repairs that cost thousands of dollars. By 8 o'clock, he had the car on his lift and was deep into the diagnosis. The main computer was completely dead, and 2 other systems had failed along with it. This wasn't just a simple repair. It was going to take time and money. Around 10, Elena walked into the shop. She looked different in the morning light, still tired, but there was something about her that seemed more relaxed than the night before. She wore simple jeans and a plain sweater, clothes that looked expensive but weren't flashy. Good morning, she said, holding 2 cups of coffee. I brought you this. The woman at the diner said you usually drink it black. David wiped his hands on a rag and accepted the coffee gratefully. You didn't have to do that. But thank you. I've been looking at your car since early this morning. How bad is it? Elena asked, though her voice didn't carry the panic most customers showed when facing major repairs. David explained what he had found, trying to use simple terms instead of technical jargon. The main computer needed replacement, along with several related components. Parts alone would cost nearly $3,000 plus labor. I know it's a lot of money. David said, if you want to take it somewhere else, I understand. Sometimes the dealer can get parts cheaper, or maybe your insurance covers electrical failures. Elena was quiet for a moment, looking at her car suspended on the lift. How long would it take you to fix it? If I can get the parts by Monday, probably 3 days of work. Maybe for if we run into complications. And you're sure you can fix it properly? David nodded. I've been working on electric vehicles for 5 years now. Took courses, got certified. Your car isn't that different from others I've repaired. What surprised him was Elena's response. Instead of negotiating price or asking for guarantees, she simply said, okay, please fix it. Most customers wanted detailed estimates, payment plans, or second opinions. Elena just trusted him to do the work. It was refreshing, but also a little puzzling. Over the next 3 days, Elena kept coming back to the shop. At first, David thought She was checking on progress, which was normal. But she didn't seem particularly interested in the car. Instead, she asked questions about the neighborhood, about his business, about his life. On Monday, she showed up around lunchtime with sandwiches from the deli down the street. "You look busy," she said. "I thought you might not have time to eat." They sat on old chairs in the back of the shop, eating and talking. Elena told him she was between jobs, staying at a small apartment she had found nearby. She said she had been traveling a lot for work and was taking some time to figure out her next step. "What kind of work do you do?" David asked. "Business consulting," Elena said, which wasn't exactly a lie. "I help companies solve problems, improve efficiency. It requires a lot of travel, a lot of meetings with people who want different things." David could relate to that. "Sounds stressful. Always being around people who want something from you." "Exactly," Elena said, and something in her voice suggested this was a bigger problem. Then David realized it gets lonely, actually, hard, to know who's being genuine and who's just being nice because they need something. David understood loneliness. Since his father died, he had thrown himself into work. He had friends, but not many close ones. Dating was difficult when you worked 12-hour days and smelled like motor oil most of the time. "Can I ask you something?" Elena said. "Why did you help me that night? You didn't know me." "It was late, raining. Most people would have kept walking." David shrugged. "My mom always said that helping people was just what you do. Besides, you looked scared. Nobody should have to stand in the rain wondering if they're safe. But you could have just called me a taxi. You didn't have to offer a ride. Or let me pay tomorrow instead of tonight." Would a taxi have known which hotel was decent and which ones to avoid? Would they have explained what was wrong with your car? David smiled. Sometimes people need more than just the minimum help. Elena was quiet, picking at her sandwich. When she spoke again, her voice was softer. "I haven't met many people like you." "Like what?" "People who help without expecting something in return." That afternoon, while David worked on her car, Elena wandered around the neighborhood. She talked to Mrs. Rodriguez at the corner store, helped Mr. Kim carry groceries to his apartment, and spent an hour listening to old Mr. Peterson tell stories about when Pine Street was mostly farmland. When she came back to the shop, she seemed different, more alive somehow. "This is a good neighborhood," she said. "It's not fancy," David replied, "but people look out for each other." Mrs. Rodriguez gives credit when folks are short on money. Mr. Kim fixes bicycles for free. Mr. Peterson knows everyone's history going back 50 years. "In my work, I meet a lot of important people," Elena said, "but I don't think I've ever been anywhere that felt this real." David looked up from the engine he was working on. "Real how?" "People here care about each other because they're neighbors, not because they want something." When Mrs. Rodriguez asked about my family, she actually listened to the answer. "When Mr. Kim offered to show me the good places to shop, he meant it. That's just how normal people act," David said. Elena smiled, but there was something sad in it. "You'd be surprised." Tuesday evening, David finished the major repairs. The car started perfectly, all systems running smoothly. Elena should have been happy, ready to return to her life. Instead, she seemed reluctant to take the keys. "Is everything okay?" David asked. "The car is perfect." Elena said, "You did excellent work. It's just, what? I've enjoyed these few days, talking with you, meeting your neighbors. It's been peaceful." David understood. Sometimes when life was complicated, simple things felt precious. "You're welcome to visit anytime. Mrs. Rodriguez always makes too much food. And Mr. Peterson loves new audiences for his stories." Elena laughed. "I might take you up on that." As she prepared to leave, Elena pulled out an envelope with cash for the repairs. David counted it and tried to hand some back. "This is too much," he said. "You did good work. You deserve fair payment. Fair payment is what we agreed on." "This is almost double." Elena insisted he keep it. "Consider it a bonus for excellent service and for making me feel welcome in your neighborhood." David reluctantly accepted, though something felt strange about Elena's attitude toward money. She handled expensive repairs and generous tips like. They were small inconveniences rather than significant expenses. As Elena drove away that night, David waved from his shop doorway. He had enjoyed their conversations too, more than he wanted to admit. There was something about Elena that made him think she understood things most people didn't. Loneliness, the value of genuine kindness, the way simple moments could mean everything. He had no idea that Elena was driving back to a world of board meetings, investment decisions, and people who measured every word for advantage. He didn't know that their simple friendship had given her something she hadn't experienced in years. The feeling of being valued for who she was, not what she owned. All David knew was that he hoped Elena would visit again soon. The neighborhood seemed brighter when she was around. 3 weeks had passed since Elena got her car back, but she kept returning to Pine Street. At first, David thought she was just being polite, stopping by to thank him again for the repairs. But her visits became regular, almost daily. She would bring coffee, help customers who seemed confused, or just sit in the corner chair reading while David worked. Her presence had become so normal that David didn't question it anymore. Elena said she was still figuring out her next job, and the neighborhood was affordable while she decided what to do. It made sense, even if some things about her story didn't quite add up. Like the jewelry she wore sometimes, pieces that caught the light in ways that made David think they might be more valuable than Elena let on, or the way she never seemed worried about money, even though she claimed to be between jobs. Or how she sometimes received phone calls that made her step outside and speak in hushed, urgent tones, but people had their secrets. And Elena's friendship had become important to David. She was easy to talk to, genuinely interested in his work, and the regular customers had started to like her. Mrs. Rodriguez called her Mija and always insisted she take extra fruit from the store. Mr. Peterson had adopted her as his newest audience for neighborhood history. Even the tough teenagers who hung around the corner had started nodding respectfully. When she passed, everything changed on a Thursday afternoon when David's phone rang. The voice on the other end was shaky and scared, his mother calling from the hospital. "David, honey, I need you to come quickly," she said. "I'm at General Hospital. The doctors say something is wrong with my heart." David's world tilted. His mother Rosa was the most important person in his life. She had raised him alone after his father died, worked 2 jobs to keep food on the table, and never complained about the sacrifices she made. She was only 62, still young, still full of life. He closed the shop immediately and drove to the hospital, his hands shaking on the steering wheel. The emergency room was crowded and chaotic. He found his mother in a small room, looking pale and frightened, connected to machines that beep constantly. "The doctors say I need surgery," Rosa told him, gripping his hand tightly. "Something about blocked arteries. They want to operate tomorrow morning." David spent the night at the hospital, holding his mother's hand and trying not to show how terrified he was. The surgeon explained the procedure. It was serious but routine, with good success rates. The problem wasn't medical, it was financial. The surgery would cost $40,000. David's insurance would cover some of it, but he would still owe nearly $25,000. Money he didn't have. Money that would force him to sell his father's garage. The only thing of value he owned. On Friday morning, Elena came to the shop looking for David. When she found it closed with no explanation, she asked Mrs. Rodriguez if she knew what had happened. "His mom is in the hospital," Mrs. Rodriguez said, crossing herself. "Heart surgery." Poor David looked so scared when he left yesterday. Elena didn't hesitate. She drove straight to General Hospital and found David in the surgical waiting room, still wearing his work clothes from the day before. He looked exhausted and defeated. "David," she said softly, sitting beside him. "Mrs. Rodriguez told me what happened. How's your mother?" "Surgery went well," David said, not looking up. "Doctor says she should recover completely." But his voice trailed off. "But what?" David finally looked at her, and Elena could see the desperation in his eyes. "I can't pay for it, even with insurance. I owe more money than I've ever seen." I'm going to have to sell the garage. Elena felt something break inside her chest. This man who had helped her without question, who had shown her what genuine kindness looked like, was losing everything because of medical bills in her world. $25,000 was what some people spent on a single dinner. But for David, it was impossible. There has to be another way, Elena said. I've thought about it all night, David replied. I could take out loans, but the interest would kill me. I could ask the hospital for a payment plan, but it would take years to pay off. The garage barely makes enough to keep me alive as it is. That evening, while David stayed with his mother, Elena made a series of phone calls. She contacted her assistant, her accountant, and her lawyer. By morning, she had arranged for something called the Community Care Foundation to contact David about a program that helped working families with medical expenses. The foundation representative called David while he was sitting beside his mother's hospital bed. They explained that someone had recommended his family for assistance. Based on his service to the community, the foundation would cover his mother's entire medical bill. No strings attached. David was suspicious at first. Things like this didn't happen to people like him, but the representative had proper credentials, legal paperwork, and references from other families they had helped. The money was real, and it was his. I don't understand, David told Elena when she visited the hospital that afternoon. I've never heard of this foundation. The representative said someone nominated me, but she wouldn't say who. Elena just smiled. Sometimes good things happen to good people. Maybe word got around about how you help everyone in the neighborhood. People noticed kindness, David, over the next few days. As Rosa recovered and David processed what had happened, Elena watched him carefully. She could see him trying to figure out how such incredible luck was possible. A few times, she caught him looking at her with questions in his eyes, but he never asked directly. The truth was getting harder to hide. Elena's assistant had been calling constantly, frustrated by her extended absence from important business meetings. Her security team was nervous about her staying in one location for so long without protection. Her accountant needed decisions about investments that couldn't wait much longer. But every time Elena thought about returning to her real life, she looked around David's neighborhood and felt something she had never experienced before: belonging. These people cared about her without knowing what she was worth. They valued her presence, not her bank account. The breaking point came when Elena overheard David talking to Mr. Peterson about expanding his garage. With his mother's medical bills gone, David was dreaming again about adding a second bay, maybe hiring an assistant, possibly starting classes to teach young people about car repair. I keep thinking about that foundation that helped Mama, David said. If people with money really care about helping working families, maybe there's hope for this neighborhood. Maybe gentrification doesn't have to push everyone out. Elena realized then that David's dreams weren't just about his garage. He saw the medical assistants as proof that wealthy people could be partners, instead of threats to communities like his. He was building hope on what he thought was random kindness from strangers. The weight of her deception was becoming unbearable. David was making plans based on a lie. He was trusting in a version of her that wasn't complete. Every day she stayed meant deeper betrayal when the truth eventually came out. That night, Elena made a decision. She would tell David who she really was. She would explain why she had hidden her identity, and hope that their friendship was strong enough to survive the truth. But as she prepared for that conversation, Elena had no idea that forces beyond her control were already in motion. A photographer had been following a tip about her unusual behavior. Business rivals were asking questions about her extended absence. The carefully constructed wall between her two worlds was about to come crashing down. Whether she was ready or not, tomorrow would bring changes that neither David nor Elena could anticipate, and their friendship would face its first real test. Saturday morning started like any other day on Pine Street. David was opening his garage. Elena was walking back from the corner store with fresh bread for Mrs. Rodriguez, and the neighborhood was slowly waking up to weekend routines. None of them knew that everything was about to change. A man with an expensive camera had been sitting in a rental car since dawn, waiting for the perfect shot. He worked for Celebrity Insider magazine, and his editor had sent him to investigate rumors about Elena Vasquez, one of the world's richest women, supposedly hiding out in a working-class neighborhood. The photographer had been skeptical. Why? Would someone worth billions be living in a place like this? But the tip had come from a reliable source, someone who claimed to have spotted her at a local diner, dressed like a regular person, sharing meals with a mechanic at exactly 9:47 a.m. The photographer got his shot. Elena was laughing at something David had said while they stood outside his garage. She looked relaxed and happy, nothing like the serious businesswoman from magazine covers. But it was definitely her. Same face, same distinctive smile, same way of tilting her head when she listened. The photographer took dozens of pictures before Elena noticed him. By then, it was too late. Within 2 hours, the first article was online. Billionaire heirs spotted living secret life with local mechanic. The headline was everywhere: social media, news websites, television screens, and store windows. David first learned about it when his phone started ringing nonstop. Reporters wanted quotes about his relationship with the mysterious billionaire. Neighbors knocked on his door asking if the news was true. Strangers began driving slowly past his garage, taking pictures. He found Elena at the small apartment she had been renting. She was sitting on the bed, staring at her phone, looking more defeated than he had ever seen her. "Is it true?" David asked quietly. Elena looked up at him with tears in her eyes. "Yes, I'm sorry." "David, I'm so sorry I lied to you." The silence stretched between them. David sat down in the only chair in the small room, trying to process what this meant. The woman he had been sharing lunches with, the person who had become his closest friend, was one of the most powerful people in the world. "Why?" he asked finally. Elena's voice was barely a whisper. "Because for the first time in 20 years, someone treated me like a normal person. Do you know what it's like to never be sure if people like you or just want something from you? To wonder if every friendship is really about your money? But you lied to me for weeks, I know, and I hated every minute of it. But David, these past few weeks with you and your neighbors, they've been the happiest I've felt since I was a child. When Mrs. Rodriguez worried about me eating enough, or when Mr. Peterson told me stories about his wife, or when you shared your sandwich with me that first day, none of that was about money. It was just people caring about people." David stood up and walked to the window. Outside, news vans were starting to arrive. People with cameras were setting up across the street. His quiet life was disappearing before his eyes. "The foundation that helped my mother," he said without turning around. "That was you, wasn't it?" "Yes." "Why didn't you just tell me then? Why the elaborate story about strangers helping working families?" Elena wiped her eyes. "Because I wanted you to believe that good things could happen without strings attached. You were so hopeful about it, talking about how maybe wealthy people really did care about communities like yours. I didn't want to take that hope away by making it about me personally." David finally turned to face her. "But it was about you. Personally, everything was about you, and I never knew it." The hurt in his voice broke Elena's heart. She had never meant to cause him pain. All she had wanted was to experience authentic friendship. But instead she had built their entire relationship on a lie. "David, please understand. When I met you that night, I was running away from my real life. I had just come from a business meeting where 3 different people tried to manipulate me for money. I was tired of being seen as a wallet instead of a person. Then you helped me without knowing who I was, and for the first time in years, I felt human." Outside, the crowd was growing. Reporters were interviewing neighbors, asking about Elena's time in the community. David could see Mrs. Rodriguez looking confused and overwhelmed as someone stuck a microphone in her face. "This is going to destroy the neighborhood," David said. "These people won't leave until they get their story. Property values will go up because of the attention. People who have lived here for decades won't be able to afford their rent anymore." Elena realized he was right. Her presence had brought exactly the kind of attention that could gentrify Pine Street overnight. The community that had welcomed her was now in danger because of her. "I'll leave," she said immediately. "I'll go back to my real life and try to make this story go away. And then what? We pretend none of this happened. We go back to being strangers." Elena didn't have an answer. She had never been in a situation like this before. In her business world, problems were solved with money or power or lawyers. But this was about trust and friendship and feelings, things that couldn't be fixed with wealth. David's phone rang again. This time it was his mother, calling from her friend's house where she was recovering. "David, honey, what's all this nonsense? On the news about Elena being some rich lady, they're saying she's worth billions of dollars. That can't be right. She brought me soup last Tuesday and sat with me for 2 hours talking about her grandmother." After he hung up, David looked at Elena with something that might have been understanding. "My mother doesn't care how much money you have. She cares that you listened to her stories and made her laugh during a difficult time. But you care." Elena said, "I can see it in your eyes. You feel betrayed." David was quiet for a long moment. "I feel confused. The person I've been talking to for weeks. The woman who helped Mr. Kim with his groceries and let Mr. Peterson teach her about neighborhood history. Was that real? Or was that just you pretending to be someone else?" "It was real," Elena said urgently. "More real than I've been in years. When I talked to your mother about her garden, when I listened to Mr. Peterson's stories, when we sat in your garage sharing lunch, that was me, the real me. Not the businesswoman, not the billionaire, just me." A loud knock interrupted them. Through the window, they could see reporters gathered outside the apartment building. Someone had figured out where Elena was staying. "We need to get you out of here," David said, his protective instincts taking over despite everything. "David, you don't owe me anything. I lied to you. I put your neighborhood at risk. I should face this alone." But David was already thinking, "There's a back way out through Mrs. Rodriguez's store. You can stay at my house until we figure out what to do next. Why would you help me after what I did?" David looked at her for a long moment. "Because despite everything, you're still the person who cried when Mr. Peterson told you about losing his wife. You're still the person who spent 3 hours helping Mrs. Rodriguez organize her stockroom just because she mentioned her arthritis was bothering her. Money doesn't change those things." As they prepared to leave through the back exit, Elena realized that David was giving her something she had never received before. Forgiveness without conditions, friendship despite disappointment, acceptance of who she really was, wealth and all. For the first time since the story broke, Elena felt a spark of hope. Maybe their friendship could survive this revelation. Maybe being honest about her identity would actually make their relationship stronger, instead of destroying it. But as they slipped out through Mrs. Rodriguez's store, both of them knew that the hardest part was still ahead. The whole world was now watching their story unfold, and they would have to decide what their friendship meant when it could no longer be private or simple. 2 weeks passed before David and Elena spoke properly again. The media storm had been intense but brief. Reporters got their pictures and quotes, then moved on to the next story. But the damage to their friendship felt deeper and more lasting. David spent those weeks thinking about everything that had happened. His neighbors kept asking him about Elena, about whether the friendship had been real, about what it meant that someone so wealthy had chosen to spend time in their community. Mrs. Rodriguez was the one who finally made him see things clearly. "Mio," she said while David was buying groceries, "that girl brought me medicine when I was sick. She helped Mr. Peterson fix his broken fence. She listened to crazy Mrs. Chen complain about her cats for 2 hours without getting bored. You think rich people fake caring about old ladies with arthritis. But she lied about who she was." David replied, "And you never hid anything from anyone? You never told a girl you made more money than you did, or told your mama you were fine. When you were struggling, people hide things when they're scared, David. Does it mean they're bad people?" That conversation stayed with David for days. He started remembering small moments, the way Elena's face lit up when Mr. Peterson told his stories, how she always asked follow-up questions about people's lives. the genuine concern in her voice when his mother was in the hospital. Meanwhile, Elena had returned to her regular life, but everything felt different now. Board meetings seemed pointless, business decisions felt empty, and the luxury that surrounded her felt isolating in ways it never had before. Her assistant noticed the change immediately. "You've been distracted ever since you came back from your vacation. Are you all right?" Elena realized she wasn't all right. She missed the simple connection she had found on Pine Street. She missed David's honest conversation, Mrs. Rodriguez's motherly concern, and the feeling of being valued for who she was rather than what she owned. More importantly, she kept thinking about David's dreams for his neighborhood. Before the media attention, he had talked about expanding his garage, maybe starting a training program for young people interested in automotive repair. He had seen her anonymous help with his mother's medical bills as proof that wealthy people could be partners with working communities rather than threats to them. Eleanor realized she could make that hope real, but only if she could repair the trust she had broken. On a Thursday morning, exactly 1 month after the story broke, Eleanor showed up at David's garage. She looked different, more formal, more like the businesswoman from magazine photos. But her eyes held the same uncertainty they had the night her car broke down. "I know you probably don't want to see me," she said, "but I have something I need to tell you." David wiped his hands on a rag and looked at her carefully. "I'm listening. I've been thinking about everything you said that day about your neighborhood, about your dreams for expanding the garage. I want to help make those dreams real, but I want to do it the right way. This time, no secret foundations, no lies, no hiding who I am." Eleanor pulled out a folder of papers. "I want to start a program that provides low-interest loans and grants to small businesses in working communities. Real partnerships between people with money and people with dreams. Your garage would be the first, but only if you want it." David looked through the papers. The program was comprehensive and well-planned, designed to help businesses grow without displacing the communities they served. "Why?" he asked. "Because you were right about wealthy people being able to help without causing harm. Because I learned more about real community in 6 weeks on Pine Street than I had in the previous 20 years, and because I miss being your friend." David set the papers down. "Elena, I've been thinking too, about what Mrs. Rodriguez said, about what my mother said, about the way you cared about people here. What did they say? That money doesn't make someone fake kindness. That you can't pretend to care about Mr. Peterson's stories, or worry about Mrs. Rodriguez's arthritis. That maybe I was more upset about feeling foolish than about you lying." Elena felt tears starting. "I never wanted you to feel foolish. You're the smartest, kindest person I've ever met. I was scared," David admitted. "Scared that everything between us had been about charity or guilt or some rich person's hobby. But thinking back on all our conversations, all the time we spent together, that wasn't charity. That was friendship." They stood in silence for a moment, both remembering the easy companionship they had shared. "Can we try again?" Elena asked, "as friends who know the truth about each other this time?" David smiled for the first time in weeks. "I'd like that, but I have conditions." "What conditions?" "No more secrets. If you're having a bad day because of business stress, you tell me. If I'm struggling with money, I tell you. We're honest about our different worlds instead of pretending they don't exist. Deal?" Elena said immediately, "And if we do this business partnership, it has to be real." "Partnership. I make decisions about the garage. You provide resources and advice. We work together. Not you paying for things and me being grateful." "That's exactly what I want," Elena said. Over the next 6 months, their renewed friendship grew stronger than it had been before. Elena divided her time between her business responsibilities and the community development project that grew from David's garage expansion. The automotive training program became a model for similar initiatives in other cities. Young people learned valuable skills while older mechanics like David shared their knowledge. The neighborhood changed, but carefully, new opportunities without displacement, growth without losing character. Mrs. Rodriguez expanded her store with Elena's business advice and David's understanding of what the community needed. Mr. Peterson started a neighborhood history project, documenting stories that might otherwise be lost. Even Mrs. Chen got help with her cat situation, though she complained it wasn't exciting enough anymore. Elena bought a small house 2 blocks from David's garage, not because she was hiding anymore, but because she had found a community where she belonged. She still traveled for business, still managed her companies, but Pine Street had become her real home. The story that had started with a broken-down car and a simple act of kindness became something neither of them had expected, proof that authentic friendship could bridge any gap, that wealth used with wisdom could strengthen communities instead of destroying them, and that sometimes the most important connections happen when people see each other as they really are. David's garage still had the same sign his father had painted years ago, but now it was surrounded by a bustling training center, a community garden Elena had helped fund, and a neighborhood that had learned to grow without losing its heart. On quiet evenings, David and Elena still sat in the old chairs behind the garage, sharing coffee and talking about their days. The conversation was different now. Elena might mention a board meeting or an investment decision. David might talk about training program challenges or neighborhood politics. But the foundation remained the same. They had learned that true friendship wasn't about hiding differences, but about accepting them. Not about perfect people, but about real ones. And not about what you could give each other, but about who you chose to be. When you were together, the woman who had once been the loneliest billionaire in the world had found family. The mechanic who had always helped others had discovered that accepting help could be just as valuable as giving it. And Pine Street continued to be a place where neighbors looked out for each other, where kindness mattered more than money, and where two very different people had discovered that friendship could change everything.